BBC Sounds.
So before you listen to your podcast, do something a bit different.
Yep, listen to the most petty and ill-informed podcast available. It's Off the Ball. It's on BBC Sounds.
The Scottish Football Podcast from BBC Radio Scotland.
Paul, so your first, your worst and your best European experience with Celtic. So let's go then with your first. You, of course, arrived at Celtic after that fantastic Champions League win with Dortmund in 97. What was it like then, Paul, your memory of your first European game at Celtic? And I'm thinking psychologically for you, you're coming there as a Champions League winner and going to a club in terms of European aspirations, they're very different.
Oh, it was the length of London Road, I guess, if you want to put it into that way. But I felt so comfortable and so at ease with it. I felt that I belonged in that environment because I'd done it. So it never fazed me one bit. The experience of doing it with Dortmund. And what Dortmund done was probably put me on a scale of that I never feared any opponent or any team, really. It was just, this is what it was going to be. Whether I win every game, I don't know, but I knew I could handle myself in that company. And that was a great thing about what Dortmund gave me, that I could handle the environment that I could play in. So, and Celtic was not being flippant, but it was easy to fit into the European scene, even though the club had probably a lot of barren years in it, and trying to live up to the expectancy level of the Lions, and rightly so, because the club should be aspiring to try and emulate that because of what all them lads done. So I felt really comfortable getting into that environment and the crowd and everything, the pressure, the atmosphere. It never fazed me, really, you know.
But how would the crowds, the atmospheres compare, Paul, with the two stadiums, Dortmund and Celtic Park, on a European night?
Yeah, very similar, Kenny. I always say if Celtic was in another league in another country, it's never going to be, it would rival anything in the world, the size of it. And I've always said that with it. Dortmund is a vast football club. Fan base is incredible. The stadium, the way it's built, is an incredible arena to play football in Dortmund because of, you've got the Sud Tribune, as I call it. I know everybody knows it as a yellow wall. It's 27,500 people standing there. And I've stood in that myself, Kenny, watching a game, which was unbelievable, ridiculous unbelievable. And I've watched games at Parkhead. It's just a different design of a stadium, but atmosphere-wise, Celtic in a European night is incredible, especially when the big guns come to you. It's an incredible atmosphere. And if Celtic had that most Saturdays or most Wednesday nights or Tuesday nights, which they will do against Lazio, Madrid and Eindhoven, that'll be rocking. So they're very similar that way. The two clubs have got a really great connection with the fan base has got. So it's very similar, but it's just the acoustics of the stadium is a little bit different.
So what then would be your best European night playing for Celtic?
Oh, dear. Do you know what? There's a couple that stand out. The Juve game when we beat them 4-3 was, I think that was just incredible night. The game, the way it ebbed and flowed. The team again, Juve they weren't as strong as the team that I played in 97, but they still had one hell of a side at that point. The atmosphere that night, it was just rocking. Do you know that we actually lost this game I'm going to talk to you about? We got beat with Valencia. I don't know if you remember that one. We lost to Valencia 1-0 over in Valencia. And I think that's one of the biggest going overs I've ever had, and we got away with a 1-0. And they came to Parkhead. I think they were on to win it that year, but it wasn't Champions League they won. I think they won the UEFA. I think that might have been the UEFA Cup night we were in, but they went to penalties. And we beat them 1-0 at Parkhead, but also went to penalties. And see the atmosphere that night? That was up there with one of the best that I'd been involved in. And I remember the gaffer Martin saying to us, "Do you want to hit a penalty?" I said, "Yeah, no problem, hit one." And I took the first one, and Canizares was in goals. And he was a brilliant goalkeeper, if you can remember. And it was the first time I came up against a goalkeeper that jumped about in his line like Zebedee. I thought, this guy's trying to put me off. But I'd made up my mind where I was going to put it. And thankfully, it went into the kind of top corner. But the significance of that game was huge. And the nice thing about that game was I got a letter, probably a few days later, from a young school kid saying, "Paul," I said to him, I was at the game, I was behind the goal, and I said to my mum or dad, I think it was, if he scores this, I'm going to stick in him at his arms, and that's exactly what I'd done when he scored. So I thought, oh, well, something good came out of it. We lost the game, which is pretty nice. But the atmospheres, the Juve game and Valencia for me was absolutely rocking. The game, Stuttgart at Parkhead was an incredible game as well, because they were coming over it. And I knew Stuttgart, I knew the way they play. I knew Balakov would play. He was a top player. I knew how he would play, because I played against him before with Dortmund in Stuttgart. That was a tough game. We beat them. I think we beat them 3-1 at Parkhead, and then I think they beat us 3-2 in Stuttgart, which ultimately we get through. And that's it. I think that was the year we went to UEFA Cup Final that year. So, do you know what? It's really difficult to pick an incredible night, because I think every European night, apart from when you play the minnows, no disrespect to the minnows that come to Parkhead, the club's expected to win, but when the big guns come, then it's a proper stadium then.
Yeah, just looking back on that Valencia game, 6th of December 2001, Larsson got your goal. Celtic won Valencia nil, as you say, 5-4. The Spanish side went through on penalties. Just in terms, Paul, of the approach to these games, would it be very, very similar from what it was for you as a Dortmund player? Celtic very much on the front foot.
Yeah, especially at home. I think for any team in that era, Kenny found it really difficult to get a result off of Celtic at that point. That was the gaffers, Martin's time there from 2000 to 2005. I think it's very difficult for any team. Doesn't matter who you are. It's a tough gig to get a result at Parkhead because of the atmosphere. Dortmund, I think, there's no many times Dortmund get beaten in domestic league and European league at home just because of that atmosphere and the way it is. When you got in the two stadiums, you actually think you're unbeatable when you're on the two stadiums, and I think that's the way you have to have your home games, especially in European nights, that you have to put a marker down that you're on the front foot, that you can get a result, albeit I think you have to be really cute with it at certain times, because I think the European teams are cuter. But Dortmund are great because they had so many world-class players that could turn the game on its head. Celtic in Martin's time was really powerful. Always, somebody asked me the question, what's the difference between the two teams? And I always say the Dortmund team was proper special and the Celtic team was a great team.
Yeah, lots of great players. I'm guessing, Paul, with the worst experience, the biggest disappointment, there'll be no surprise there. We'll go back to Seville.
Oh, but Kenny, without a doubt, if you look at that, I think personally and collectively as a club, personally, I'd love to have said I'd won the Champions League and won the UEFA Cup and the 2 European winners' medals. There's no many from Scotland that can actually say it. You know, only when you look at it, there's no many Scotsmen that can actually, turn around and say they've done it. And to have done that is the biggest regret I've got in football. Without a shadow of doubt, it's the biggest regret, not winning that. The game itself was incredible. The heat, I guess you've probably been to Seville. I mean, as soon as we stepped out on that pitch, it was humidity and the heat was roasting. But without making excuses, Kenny, I remember training on the pitch the night before. I thought, this is no great, this pitch, because it had been relayed. And for a European night, I didn't think it was good enough for a European final. I didn't think the stadium was good enough for a European final. I didn't think it was big enough, because the amount of Celtic fans that took over the place, it was never big enough to hold it. And that's not making excuses. But Guy Portal or Jude, they'd done a number on us. They were cute with it. They were a top side because he went on to win the Champions League the next year. They'd a manager there that was starting to make his mark in Josie. And if you look at their team, my God, they had some brilliant players, but we were so close to doing it. But I just didn't think we turned up or we brought our A game to the table that night, which we've got to do in a final. And I just didn't think we'd done that night, where it was just one hurdle too many for us to jump. Bobo sending off didn't help. But the big guy was brilliant, and without Bobo, in my opinion, without Bobo playing the way he did in Boa Vista, we wouldn't have got there, because he was brilliant in the semi-final.
Yeah, my memories of that, Paul, we were out there. I was broadcasting the bulletins from the stadium, the news bulletins throughout the afternoon, but I didn't actually have a ticket to stay on and go to the game. But I managed to find a way of staying in the stadium until kick-off. And my memory that night is, A, the incredible atmosphere, but C, just watching Henrik Larsson that night.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like watching something in slow motion when he was going up, in the air. It was like elegant. He was majestic.
Yeah.
I guess you'll all have your own personal feelings, and you're missing out that night. But for Henrik Larsson, he was immense that night, wasn't he?
Yeah, his 2 goals were brilliant. It was a brilliant striker to play with. And I played with him. Obviously, he joined just before. I think the summer before I came, and I never knew him at all, really. I never knew Henrik or Reggie or Mark Reaper and people like that. I never knew the guys. I knew some of the Scottish lads from being in the national team, but I never knew any. And I knew then that this guy can finish, And I came from, as you said, Dortmund, where Riedler, Sharpie, Muller would hardly miss if they got a 1v1. And Henrik was in the same category. I just knew if we had a chance he would score. We became close friends, and we had a really good relationship on the pitch. And a lot of people miss a lot of things because his work rate was phenomenal. You're obviously talking about his goals and things like that, but his work rate was second to none, which you expect from top players. That's what you expect. That's a given, Kenny. That's not, by the way, Henry, can you work hard today? We've got a better chance if you work hard. That was a given. But his timing in the box, his finishing, I just always felt so comfortable. If he had a chance, he would score. But forget everything else. Just forget his football. He was a guy who was great with us, and we had a lot of mutual respect, and we still speak now and again to this day, and just a brilliant all-round footballer, and genuinely went to Man United and done it, went to Barcelona and done it, came to Celtic and done it. So he was a top player.
And just finally, on that game, Paul, I've interviewed Martin O'Neill, I've interviewed Sean Maloney. They both said that's the one game they can't watch back. It's still too painful. Is that the same for yourself?
Well, I've never watched the Champions League final back, and I've certainly not watched the UEFA Cup final back. And never watched it. Never watched both whole games, Kenny. That's even the final when I won it. And I've never watched the Seville. Never watch it, and never will watch it. The memories are still there of losing it. The scenes that the Celtic fans gave us that night, and the run that we had. But I think if you look at that Celtic era, anybody would say it's probably the Lions for me is the best. Without a shadow of doubt, the Lions for me is the best. The Paul McStee, Danny McGraney, all them guys, absolute world-class players. I'd like to think we were right top side that year under Martin's time, and they would have gave anybody a game, that's for sure.
The Scottish Football Podcast from BBC Radio Scotland.